Hello and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duvall, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who, like me, is looking at Game of the Year lists and just shaking his head, wondering where he'll find the time.
Tim Longo.
Man, it is that time of year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like every website is starting to put out their top 10s or 25s or whatever, and I just look at it and go, yeah, I don't know where that's gonna go. I'm still working on last year's top 10s.
Well, that's what I was just gonna say. I mean, not to blame the podcast, but largely because of the podcast, like I'm still working on last year's as well. Like I still want to play Alien Isolation. I don't even know when that came out.
That's at least 2 years ago
or something. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, I try to stay relevant on a few specific things, but yeah, I mean, I haven't gotten my Switch yet, which I hope to do over the holidays and stuff. But yeah.
Plus, right about now, I've been having the carpal tunnel problems, and so I'm basically not playing games other than for the podcast right now. Yeah. So I'm very limited, and I hope that I'm able to play some more over the break. I own most of the games that are in contention because I'm an idiot, but whether I'll actually get to them before 2017 breaks, who even knows?
Well, and almost all of them are epic games too. Like they're just long.
That's right. I know.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to playing like What Remains of Edith Finch because I'll be able to play it in an afternoon.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, that's a good idea.
And there are a couple like that, but others are like Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, of course, both of which I played a bit of, and Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Zero Dawn, and I just look at those and shake my head because.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, even the new Assassin's Creed sounds like it's not bad. So
right, yes, that's been getting good reviews too, and I've played a ton of those. Although I'm like 3 or 4 behind now. I have Unity to play. I have, and the other one, the one that was set in the Victorian era,
Syndicate,
whatever that was called, Syndicate. Right, I have that one to play. So maybe someday I'll retire and have time for all this stuff. Anyway, let us set that aside for now. I hope everyone's enjoying their Game of the Year play. But those who are playing along with us, we have turned to 2001's Anachronox. And this one's a bit unusual for us. We don't... we normally try to pick games that have clear games that have derived from them. Or are standouts and clearly kicked off something or have been very influential in some ways. This is more kind of the reverse in a way. As we were talking in pre-show, you were talking about some of the influences that were clear here.
Well, yeah, I mean, Brett and I were talking in pre-show just that this is sort of we've talked about it a little bit off and on, I think, but what I might sort of lovingly call a mashup, because it's you can kind of trace back some of the things that have influenced this game's design and the different genres, right? Because just to throw out some that we already talked about in pre-show, just that it's got the JRPG feel to it from a structure and combat perspective, but then it's also a third-person just action run-around game, but it's also there's some sort of adventure game qualities to it, but then it's it's in id Tech, so it's got this weird kind of quakey feel to it in some of the levels, but then it's got humor. Like, it's the weirdest mashup of games, but it's not like this game probably influenced anything directly, though. There's probably some things we could guess at. Like I forgot to mention pre-show Mass Effect and some stuff that
sure,
I'd be interested to talk about. But we haven't played really too many games on the podcast that, like you said, it's the reverse where we're talking more about how this game has come to be from its influences rather than, something that started a trend of a genre or something like that. So it's actually kind of refreshing, but man, this game is weird. It is not what I thought it was.
I know. I tried to imagine what it might be, and it was not
even
and
close.
We'll get to all this, but yes, it was not. It definitely does not did not fall into sort of my mental mold. And it's because it's been so long, I really didn't have a good sense of what people were talking about back in 2001. Which, for the record, we did recently play a 2001 game in Silent Hill 2, but I want to stress particularly the PC titles rather that were out in 2001, just to give a sense. So Max Payne was one. Clive Barker's Undying was another, both of which are kind of interesting because they are first and third person games that are trying to do something a little bit different. Of course, Max Payne giving us bullet time, and Clive Barker's Undying being sort of a horror experience, but also has this, I seem to remember that one has you jumping to different viewpoints if characters die or they have different abilities. There's all this stuff with that. And what was the other one?
Oni was what we talked about too.
Right, yeah. Oni, which is not specifically a PC title. It may have had a PC port, but it was also a console title, PS2 title, I think, which was Bungie, as I recall. They incorporated some other company into Bungie and finished their game Oni, which was a third-person action-adventure game. So yeah, a couple of weird titles there that we talked a bunch about 2001 in general when we talked about Silent Hill 2, but those were a few that stood out to me. Also Soul Reaver 2 this year, which is a console title. Aliens vs. Predator 2, more of the same probably for that game more than anything else. And then just a ton of stuff. This being the first full year of the PS2 and the launch year of the original Xbox. So you also have all the stuff that came out on that, including my first professional game, which was Starfighter, and the original Halo. So, which didn't make its way to PC for several years, as I recall, but at least was talking about was part of the conversation in this year in this kind of area. In terms of games. But yeah, lots of weird mashups, and this is probably the mashiest uppest of those titles, if I can coin a really bad word.
Yeah.
This game is definitely strange and different. So let's just dive in, I guess. The first thing that I think of diving into this game is that unlike every other Western RPG, there's no character creator.
Oh yeah, good point. I didn't even dawn on me to put that note down. But yeah, that's a huge. That is it fair to say that's more JRPG-ish in that?
That
sense?
Is definitely JRPG-ish. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. And I think this game wants to be a JRPG way more than it wants to be a Western RPG.
But absolutely, yeah. Yeah. Down to like even some of the names, like the healing. No, is it not the healing? The what's the name of the Final Fantasy thing where you can resurrect the resource where you resurrect people? It's
the Phoenix Down.
Phoenix Down. Yeah, and then in here it's the time. What is it? The thing for that is the time. Oh, it's something close to that. I feel like that. It's almost like
I didn't have anyone die, so I don't.
No, I didn't either. But I know I just looked what that item did, and anyway,
okay.
It's almost like it's a parody or an homage to. Some of those
it has something to do with those bugs that fly around that you save on.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever those are called. Yeah. I didn't make a note of that either. Yes, it definitely is different from a Western RPG in that the character is specific. And whether or not he's a chosen one is actually pretty unclear at this point. He doesn't feel like a chosen one. He's such a sad sack that it just doesn't seem likely that he's a chosen one. He seems more like a character that you'd find in a more adventure-y first-person shooter such as Deus Ex than he feels like. Not that he's as good a guy as J.C. Denton, but he's more just he's a specific character.
Yeah,
he kind of down on his luck and just kind of making his way through life, and things are going to happen up and around him more than anything else.
Do you mean the chosen one because that's a JRPG, typical JRPG theme? Oh, I see. Yeah.
Well, or even more so a Western RPG theme.
Oh yeah, that's fair. I guess it's in both. Yeah, Baldur's Gate. Yeah.
Right. That's kind of the thing that they hook the narrative on, in that you're often the chosen one, and therefore it doesn't really matter who you are in your choices, because ultimately you're the one who has to kill the bad guy, whoever the big monkey is. And here you don't really get a sense of that, which is kind of interesting. He also has sort of a Blade Runner feel.
Yeah, I wrote Blade Runner down, and kind of that cyberpunk, which they reference as well, cyberpunk aesthetic. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned world building as a theme, which I think is, I also wrote notes down about that. Like, it's very, they did a lot with a little in this era,
Yes.
Another game that didn't come out this year apparently, but I always confuse the two of them because I feel like they came out near each other, is, remember Omicron?
Oh yeah, the Nomad Soul. That would have been maybe a year or even two before this. I think that's 1999. But yes, I agree.
Was that, what's his name? Early David Cage. Yeah,
first David Cage game. I think
David Bowie was involved.
Right, David Bowie was on the cover art and did a song for it.
Yeah,
It wasn't, I don't think it was all 3D, and it was more adventure game. But I feel like it had 3D. Maybe it was.
No, it was 3D. I think I don't remember the engine, but I just, a similar vibe of this weird third person game where you're roaming around this world, the sci-fi world, and kind of doing adventure-y kind of things, but not heavy on mechanics. But anyway, yeah, just it's an interesting. We talked a lot about the transition of getting, people figuring out what they wanted to do with real-time 3D, and I think this is a good example of that mashing up of genres to get there. But with the world building, to go back to that, I was pretty immediately impressed in a weird way that they committed so fully to that. Because there's a lot of like lore and backstory stuff, and people, there's a pretty the characters are pretty consistently referencing things in a unified way. You know what I mean? And there's a lexicon, and it's, I mean,
and it just goes for it. It doesn't hold back and spend a ton of time. I mean, there's an opening cutscene that just kind of establishes, hey, we're on this weird planetoid bubble thing, which is near this space gate. Just to sort of say, okay, look, we're far in the future. We're out in space. There are alien artifacts. We don't know much about them. Well, it's pretty much what you established from that first thing.
Yeah.
That first cutscene. But beyond that, it's all just in the world. The fact that there are aliens walking around and talking in different languages, which is kind of its own amusing sort of joke in a way. And having conversations, we'll get back to humor because that's a whole nother thing. But it just sort of digs in and says, okay, well, this is where you are. And like a good science fiction story, it doesn't tell you too much about it up front. It just assumes you're going to pick up things as you go. And I really appreciate that. It doesn't have, like, the first conversation you have with anybody go into this gigantic lore dump about why we're here and what year it is and what all the different resources are and this faction is battling with that. And none of that stuff comes out except in a sort of organic way as you talk to people.
Yeah.
And I really, really appreciate that because I'm the anti-lore guy on the cast. I could care less. And I don't want to be preached to about lore. There were no lore bombs here, really. So that was kind of nice.
Well, and I mean, we're still learning those lessons about how to say less and have some of that mystery come into things, right? And let players, I mean, just go through ebbs and flows of that, I think, as an industry of like overtelling and then kind of letting people fill in the gaps themselves. And, especially with fantasy and science fiction based properties. And I mean, who knows how much of that was intentional on their part and how much of that was just either production realities or technical realities. Cause it's like, for instance,
right.
There's sort of dialogue trees going on, not dialogue trees, but there's Well, sort of. I don't, how many. The one thing that I discovered probably a little bit later than I'd like is talking to people more than once is actually important, kind of important,
Yes,
so because
yes.
it doesn't present you with all the dialogue tree. I don't know if that was a technical limitation or a choice or what, but when you talk to them, keep talking to them, there's more lines written, as well as potentially sometimes like side missions and stuff pop up. But they don't tell you any of that stuff. But yeah, it was just kind of refreshing to like, not, like you said, not have everything, jammed down your throat as far as that goes. But there's, I don't know if there was, you get the impression that maybe there was a universe Bible that they wrote. They probably didn't, but they had some inner consistency that they must have had to have all, abided by, which you respect that for sure. And, Mass Effect came to mind, Halo came to mind a little bit, though it came out in the same year, but Halo is, a derivative of a lot of other science fiction, Ring World and those sorts of things. And then this concept of a shell world is also not new. And then there's the ancient alien species that, you're living on this planet that is long dead and was this alien's world, and so that's kind of a common trope too. But I don't know, for whatever reason,
but not as common in video games, I would say.
Oh, you mean at the time? At
the time, right? I would say.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, so between Halo, Mass Effect, much later, StarCraft,
Mass Effect later,
like they're all versions of Pro something,
right?
Protoss, Prothean, Promethean, like Forerunner. So yeah, I mean that's fair. It's probably not in the time, but what science fiction wise, yeah, you're right. It's probably coming from novels that would escape me. I don't know if it's Asimov or who would have started that kind of trend, but they fully commit to it. And then there's that concept of those the spirals. What do they call them? The sort of energy fields that create essentially hyperspace. Faster than light travel.
The senders or whatever they are.
Yeah, those beams, like you said in an opening cutscene where it shows those beams coming out of the shell world, right? And those are left by the ancient species, which is exactly like a mass relay, right? For Mass Effect.
Exactly, yes. Yes, it really is.
We don't understand, but it allows us to travel faster than light, basically whatever, wormholes. And so those are there, and so you're using them. But then it's another mystery of like, yeah, this technology was left for us, and we don't know much about it. But
yeah, that definitely reminds me a little bit of, and I've never actually had to pronounce his name, but Poul Anderson, science fiction writer. He wrote Gateway,
no, I don't know,
which is very, yeah. I mean, he also wrote, I think, Rendezvous with Rama, which might be more well known, but I'm pretty sure he wrote Gateway, which has a similar sort of conceit where we've found a world, we can launch from it, we have some technology, but we basically don't really know how well it works, and you basically are taking a shot in the dark of where it's going to end you up.
Oh, Stargate kind of stuff, maybe.
Exactly, and so you're being launched by some launcher, and you're hoping it's going to take you someplace useful and interesting. Actually, interestingly enough, Paul Anderson died this year. Died in 2001.
Oh, weird.
So I didn't know that. Oh yeah. So
well,
yeah, I'm pretty sure I read Gateway. I'm pretty sure that's Poul Anderson. I apologize if I got that wrong, but I think that's right.
Well, I mean, I think even the sci-fi tropes are a mashup in here, right? Like they have a lot of some, but I didn't mention this in pre-show, but one that I did think of and didn't write a note down, but luckily just remembered. It reminds me of Babylon 5 in a lot of ways. I don't know if you ever watched that. That show.
I did not.
So that is a weird. You remember our mutual friend Jeff Jones was obsessed with it.
Gateway was Frederick Pohl. God damn it, the pool and the pole messing me up.
Oh,
okay,
man, failure. Anyway, Babylon 5 was a weird cult show, very, very deep, I'd say, in world building and backstory and lore and plot, and very intriguing in a lot of ways. And I don't know, I generally thought it was quite good, but very different from Star Trek and very very, very unorthodox. What's his name? J. Michael Straczynski was the creator of it, and he's moved on to do various other things. But anyway, yeah, that's one for the audience who has watched that show. It reminded me of that too. And then the other reference that I pulled,
that is a show I watched exactly one episode of.
It's hard to get into. It's hard to get into, but it's the kind of show that I feel like it's so, like, talk about like world building and lexicon and universe Bible, like so well thought through. Sure. That I think it's one that grows on you and that people really come to really appreciate the more you watch it. So yeah, it's hard to watch on the first couple episodes. But the other pool that I thought of for the main character, what's his name? Sly Boots, or is Nick
Sly Boots, Sylvester Sly Boots.
Yeah, it's a great, and we'll have to talk about the humor in a second. But I thought for sure Firefly would have come out before this game and would have been an influence, but it came out after this game. But as far as like Mal from Nathan Fillion's character from Firefly, like this guy is nearly the same character.
Definitely a prototype. Yes, I my pull was definitely more from I think I already mentioned Blade Runner, but also just that sort of noir schmuck, a guy who just kind of keeps falling into things rather than really planning them. He's down on his luck. I mean, he feels like the down on his luck detective, and then this dame walked in, right? Sort of thing that you've seen a million times in films from the 50s and 60s, in film noir, whether or not it's the sort of suave Sam Spade who's got a smart line for everything, or even just a more schmucky kind of character. My pull actually was Bob Hoskins' character in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Eddie Valiant, who was this not as good looking as Sylvester here, Sly Boots, but who had a lot of the same qualities. Down on his luck, maybe drinking a little too much, maybe just needing a really good job, sort of a sad sack who you'd like to believe is going to make something more of himself, but you don't really hold out a huge amount of hope either.
Well, in the way that people talk about him, right, which is consistent with this game, where pretty much anyone who knows Sly in this game, or I think people shorten it down to even Boots, right? I think a lot of people just call him Boots. Hilarious. A lot of the people that know him kind of talk down to him as sort of like, anytime you do something good, they're surprised. They're like, oh, you're really trying hard now.
Yes. Surprise.
Yeah, there's a history to kind of the mess ups you've probably had, Boots has had in the past, right? Where they're not explicit about where you've failed, but which adds to the mystique of it. It's like, oh, what's this guy's past? I wonder what's going on there. It's such a weird game. It's really, totally caught me off guard. But I've enjoyed it, and it's very intriguing. And we've talked about, for this era, I think, especially for Western sort of third person and first person games that are kind of exploring this area, world structure is interesting too, right? Because it's not fully linear. You're going back and forth between different sections, and they're streaming in those levels.
It has reminded me the most of the Hong Kong area of Deus Ex, which we'll talk about someday.
Oh yeah.
That's what even though that has more explicit load screens and things like that. Here I definitely felt I'm going back and forth a lot. Although I will say, to its credit, I understood where I was always in this game and how to get where I was going in a way that I was just flabbergasted. I had no idea that would happen. I thought I would be lost, especially with the technology of the time and the limited amount of textures and just how games like this were typically built at the time. I thought for sure I would be lost and annoyed. Like Grand Theft Auto 3, which came out in this year as well, is a game that for at least the first couple hours of playing it, I had no idea where I was on the map at any given time. And I would ultimately build a sense of the city out of necessity in order to fulfill some of the missions. And I think that's part of that game's strengths, and maybe we'll play that one someday. But in this game, I never felt lost.
Yeah.
which is extraordinary to me. I never thought I might not always know where to go. If it was a place I hadn't been yet, it might take me a while to find my way to that. But I never couldn't get to a place that I did know.
Yeah.
So
they have a pretty good
I was
sense
surprised by that. So that's pretty remarkable.
They have a pretty good sense of districts, and such. I will say one minor note that I wrote down as a X level designer that my OCD kicks in, that the geometry mashup here with how they've constructed their worlds architecturally is just super bugs me, because it's like there's so many nonsensical structures that are just and
so what yes, I agree. I feel like, so my takeaway from that has been, this was a thing that some race built billions of years ago. And then multiple alien races have come and built crap on it.
Yeah,
and so
okay. Well, yeah.
I feel like right outside the bar when you start, you have that weird, it's all stone and there's huge areas falling away on either side. And I think that's what it was like originally. And then you go through some corridor and I'm like, okay, and this has been added on.
Yeah.
And then there's some metal structure. I'm like, oh, okay. And then somebody added that on. And I just kind of, my feeling of this hodgepodge was, this is a thing that we're not even the second race to come to. We are the 30th to come along and build crap on top of.
Yeah, that's fair.
And of course, we put in neon and stuff like that in the casino district. But
yeah,
that's neither here nor there.
Which is very Blade Runner, right? That layers upon layers of civilizations, right, yes. and yeah, just intriguing stuff with like the way that the planet, Anachronox, the planet shifts, like almost like plate tectonics kind of stuff, which is really fascinating.
Yes,
idea, which is like probably taken from some place. I don't know where that reference is from, but it's an interesting thing. And then the characters talk about
Dark City was a movie that was in 1998. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. Dark City?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, I have seen that. I forgot about that it had shifting.
Right, so it has a shifting city. They're doing like experiments on the... Yeah. No, that's the City of Lost Children.
Okay, Dark City. I didn't see Dark City, so that's why I didn't get the reference yet.
Okay, yeah, Dark City has... it's directed by Alex Proyas, and I forget... I think it's Rufus Sewell, who is the main character, and he also plays a sort of
gumshoe
underdog in a way.
Yeah,
he's not really a gumshoe because he's lost his memory. He doesn't really know what he is, but he presents as a gumshoe. He looks like a guy with kind of not a great suit and maybe been beat up a couple times, even though he's an amnesiac at the beginning. And so there's all kinds of weird stuff, but that is a city that itself reconfigures every night at midnight or something like that. So that's probably a pull for this as well.
Well, and then
good movie. I recommend it to listen.
Yeah, that's one I've missed. I need to go back and the other side of the mashup that I was talking about earlier that I forgot to mention is sort of the. We talked about this I believe, on one of the episodes, or as a theme maybe even during Final Fantasy IX. And I feel like in this era, for maybe like 5 or 8 years, there was a phase here, especially as we've talked about a lot, the transition into 3D of this time, where because the fidelity was lower and because the teams were smaller and because people were more jack of all trades, when you had an idea about what you wanted to do in the game, scripting it and making it come into reality and essentially a one-off or custom sequence was way more doable and possible than it is these days. These days, we've talked a lot about where, okay, we're going to create a mechanic. Okay, how many times are you going to use that mechanic? Is it something that we're going to reuse? Because it's so expensive to make it. So let's make sure it's a part of the sandbox or whatever, And so you really invest in these things. But back then, like one level designer could come up with whatever the heck they wanted using the scripting, get a texture artist, you throw some geometry, especially in id or Unreal, id Tech or Unreal, and you're off to the races case in point, the freaking boat section, which came out of nowhere, and I was like, what is
Right.
this about?
Yes.
But then,
Yep.
but there's all these little weird mini games and like just little weird sequences that are one-off, unique moments that they just did what they wanted to do, because it was an idea somebody had. We talked a little bit about this, I think, on Half-Life as well when we had our guest on, but so
Right,
that was just
Dario
an era,
yeah.
where I feel like there was more freedom, and the indie movement's bringing some of that back, but there was just more freedom where the team, unless it completely broke things, they were okay doing these one-off things or these little mini moments because it was doable. A couple people could do it rather than a team of 10 people having to create a system or a mechanic, altogether, where the fidelity would have to be higher.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, at this point, John Romero says it takes you a week maybe to make a full Quake map, like a fully functional Quake map.
Yeah.
As opposed to Doom, where it was probably a day. And here, the other thing too is that because there was not as much memory to spend on things like animation, and we'll have to talk later about this being fully voiced and what impact that has on stuff. But since you've got sort of an audience who's used to the limitations of the medium, you also can just reuse stuff. And the fact that the hand goes nowhere near the thing that it's activating or whatever, you just kind of wave your hands at.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine. And the audience is fine with it. And a lot of that doesn't fly anymore. We notice, this thing interpenetrates this other thing or what have you. And I think that is partly, that's a number of things. I mean, I think one is that the audience is larger, and because it's larger, it's less forgiving just by its nature.
Yeah.
So there's things that we would not have noticed ourselves playing games at this time, like the world popping in as stuff loaded is not a thing you see in the actual world. And most people who are not gamers would look and say, oh, wow, that thing just came into existence. And we go, oh, yeah, it just loaded or it just came to be visible or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember reading an article along those lines probably 15 years ago, which is like, I played this game with my dad, and these are the things he picked out. And it was all this stuff that we had at that point given up on being fixed, at least in those generations. So there's those sorts of things where we just gave it a pass.
Suspension of disbelief was different, right, at that time. I mean,
yes, absolutely.
Chased this fidelity and not necessarily photorealism, but at least sense of real place for games these days. And if, anything that breaks you out of that would be seen as a, quality hit. When these days it was much more left up to interpretation about what was actually going. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we were more forgiving. And again, this 3D space, like in a 2D, Super Nintendo phase, like obviously even more forgiving because it was all essentially stylized because it had to be. But this was this weird era of trying to get to where we are today, and beyond, but really awkward growing pains of an industry that was just trying to figure out, like, can you mash these genres together? And what if you did this and then it was also, our team likes humor, so let's make it a humorous science fiction mashup RPG with JRPG combat, which we haven't even talked about. Maybe we'll talk about that next time. But
right, yeah, we're already a half hour here on the first stuff, but yes, I definitely want to come back to the humor. There's a lot.
Yeah,
there's a lot there.
Well, we should hit humor and maybe combat next time. But I definitely want to throw out there that some of the best names of characters I've ever seen, and almost consistently, even the side characters you meet walking down the street have interesting, weird, funny names. I'm just like,
that's true.
I just had a blast. And I was kind of skimming the wiki a little bit, and some of the characters coming up, some of their names are...
No, my favorite character name ever was Stiletto anyway.
Yeah.
Which is a name that I just remember. It's one of those handful of names. It is a terrific name, and we haven't even met Stiletto yet. She has been mentioned, I believe. and I'm pretty sure she's in a picture on the wall in his office as well. So she's in the background, but that's another sort of nice bit of
Grumpos,
storytelling.
Matavastros. Mistech, I think, is cool. I'm just kind of looking at a couple things here.
Right, Mistech is pretty good,
and kind of where that comes from. Even the name Anachronox, they describe to you. People will talk to you about it. Or no, there's actually there's almost like a what's that lexicon thing in Mass Effect with all the facts and lore? I can't help you there. Oh no, people are gonna kill me. It's not a lexicon. It's shoot. Anyway, they have that sort of repository of all the lore information as you play through the game, and so you can go back and read more if you want to. They have a mini one of those in this game.
Is it a codex?
Codex.
Codex.
Yeah. Okay. Codex. Thank goodness. They get ripped apart for that.
They do. They actually, yes, they do.
So I was reading that stuff, and they kind of tell you.
Right. They do. They do. They touch on all that stuff. Another thing we'll probably have to talk about is the quest journal or thinness thereof, because
yeah, right. Some things aren't
basically
even logged.
Basically no subquests are logged. It's very frustrating.
Yeah,
I'm glad I played this block all as one thing, because I had no idea. If there are any that I missed, I don't know what they are at this point. They're gone.
And they're not critical, of course. But this, I mean, talk about a thinly fragilely scripted game. Like, this is all held together, I would assume, just with tape and bubble gum, and just like as far as scripts go, right? Because even dialogue options, right? They didn't create trees. They just have you. It's just they're just cycling through the next dialogue choices in a very linear fashion.
And, yeah, sure. And if you happen to have done the thing that needs to be done with this character, you just get the next thing for that quest or whatever.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I'm probably a bug farm too, in the way that it's built. But fascinating game. And if we have some big topics we can talk about more next time, for sure, because the humor we have to hit, I'm sure it's part of why it's a cult classic. And then also, the combat we have to talk about, which is super weird. You totally see the influences, but man, I'm playing, are you playing on easy or normal?
I'm playing on normal, actually. Yep.
Yeah, I decided to play on easy, and I
don't blame you.
I kind of regret it because it's almost too easy. It's always hard. That's a hard choice, right? Because you're not sure how far it's going to go, but it's a little too easy. But I kind of just want to
change it at any time.
Oh, you can? Oh, okay.
I believe so. You can go to the options and just change it, I think.
Okay, I'll look into that. But
want to do that. All right. Well, let's take a quick break, come back and do some feedback, and talk about and maybe figure out next time.
Yes.
Welcome back from the break. Before we get into our emails and reviews and things like that, we had a couple of things that we wanted to thank people for, and you have the first of those.
Yeah, I forgot. I had in my notes and forgot to actually read the note from last episode. I want to thank my friend from work at 343, Chase Thompson, who provided me with my N64 copy of, or his N64 copy of Mario 64. I had gone to my retro shop and they had a copy there, which I was going to acquire. And on my way there, they had sold it. So I had the N64. Wow. I was ready to go.
Hot seller.
Yeah. No, they actually said they probably get a 1 or 2 a week and they sell out that week.
Oh, wow.
Mario 64 specifically, because it's a pretty, I guess. So immediately I went to somebody I know, Chase, at work. I was like, Chase is an N64 fan. He literally has one at his desk, and I was like, Chase, I need to play this tonight. Do you have a copy? So he was very gracious, and in fact, I believe he didn't have a copy. He went to his local store and bought one because he always wanted one. So he went above and beyond for himself, but also for me. So thank you, Chase.
Well, thank you very much, Chase. I'm glad you provided that so that he could play like half as many levels as he was supposed to play for the first time. And only managed to catch up at the very end.
I paid for it. I paid for my falling behind in blood. But you also had a thank you, or we have a thank you for this.
We do, a collective thank you to Aaron Evers. So we've heard from Aaron Evers before on the cast. He wrote in at one point quite a while ago, and then over the summer as well, after the rains in Houston, he had wrote in and said how he was listening while they were draining out the city. And so we appreciate all of that. But he also quite a ways back had sent us a gift of both Anachronox, MDK, and now I'm
Giants.
Oh, right, and Giants, Citizen Kabuto, right. So thank you, goodness. From Good Old Games. And while we don't generally pick out our titles from pure recommendations, we've had several, and I keep note of them, and we will come to a lot of them. This went above and beyond, and we were thinking, oh, you know what? That is a game that we both have always wanted to play. They all have interesting things about them, and maybe someday we'll get to the other two. But certainly we thank Aaron for sending us along copies to those few games, and in particular Anachronox, which of course we're playing this series. So thank you, Aaron, and happy holidays to all of you. Let's move on to email. I sent you the first one, and I of course sent it to you because the name's in German, and so I'm curious to see how you pronounce it.
I know, I was looking at it earlier. I'm like, this is not going to go well. Okay, so the subject is just a little feedback. So you're just getting off to a good start. From Chris Timaben.
Right, okay, the B?
Yeah,
that B thing? Uh-huh. Yeah, it's not a B.
Damn it.
It's called an SZ, I think.
Okay.
So it's basically like a double S.
Oh, so Tiamazen.
Right. I'd say Timmessen or Timmessen. Yes.
Timmessen. Okay.
Metzen, maybe? Metzen?
Chris, you guys send us a clip of you saying your names.
I'm so sorry, Chris, that we're abusing you in this way.
I think he's probably
because clearly this is his real name. Like who would make this up?
I was fearing that wasn't a B, and so I just put my foot in my mouth. Anyway, hey guys, just downloaded the next episode of your great and entertaining podcast. I'm not a game developer myself yet, he says, but I write down every idea.
Sorry, I should have edited for English.
No, it's okay. I write down every idea and inspiration I can get. Who knows, perhaps in the future I have the chance to use some of these ideas, which I agree you should do that. And your podcast takes a huge part of it, and your podcast takes a huge part of it in the last months. I'm not sure if I caught that right. I think I just want to thank you both for an awesome analysis of the games you play for the podcast. And one quick side note or moment while listening to one of the Super Mario 64 episodes, I listened to this podcast through my phone, and just in the right moment, someone texted me and my Super Mario coin notification sound appears. That's nice. Awesome. That's brilliant. Love it. Still hoping that you will play the first Metal Gear Solid one time, which we will. I think that would be the first game I try to play along with you guys. Keep up the great work. Every time, a pleasure to listen to a new episode. Best regards, Chris. And yes, this is my real name, he says. P.S. Sorry for the bad English. He's from Germany. So no worries there, Chris. We're really happy you wrote in at all. So thanks for doing that. And believe you me, I also cannot wait until we play Metal Gear Solid.
Soon. It's coming.
I think so. Yeah, and that's hilarious about his coin notification. And as I may have mentioned, but for Chris's sake, all of my phone audio is Metal Gear sounds. So when we eventually play Metal Gear, that might happen to me.
Oh, wow. So when your wife calls you, does it go, Meryl?
No, but my meeting notification is the exclamation alert sound.
Oh, of course it is.
And that means I have to go to a meeting, and my phone ring, of course, is the codex phone, little thing. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Wow. Brilliant. You poor sad person.
No, it's Rico. Okay. You go next.
Yes, I'll go next. But yes, thank you, Chris. Sorry for abusing your last name. I gave it to Tim just for the fun of seeing him try to figure it out. And
I'm sure Chris went
about as well as I expected. The man has a trouble with English, never mind German. Subject, orchestrated music moment in Mario 64 from Mark Garcia. Greetings, Brett, and the man who probably now collects 100 pennies off the ground and expects to receive a power star, Tim.
Please.
That's very much in keeping with our intro, so I like that. Thank you, Mark. I've been a long-time listener of the podcast and eagerly await the release of each weekly episode. I was equally delighted to hear you both discussing the music in Mario 64 because this game has one of my favorite musical moments that is directly tied to gameplay in any game. I don't know if you noticed during your playthrough, but in the two main water levels, Jolly Roger Bay and Dar Dar Docks, the player's movement around the stage determines the depth of musical layers on the track. Dar Dar Docks that plays in the background. In Jolly Roger Bay, if the player stays out of the water, then the only piece of the track that will play is the melodic chimes. Moving Mario further into the water then adds the string accompaniment, and finally diving to the depths and emerging in the underwater cave will add the percussion layer to the mix. Similarly, in Jolly Roger Bay, when you start out in the pool with the manta ray and shark, there is only the melody layer playing. Swimming into the tunnel that connects to where Bowser's sub is located adds in the string accompaniment, and then making landfall on the docks that lead to the sub adds in percussion.
Whoa.
What's more, if you go backwards in the level, for example, in Jolly Roger Bay, swimming back to the starting point, the musical track strips itself back down to just the melody layer. For me, it's one of those small moments that emphasizes the level of care and polish that Nintendo put into the experience. Anyway, this was just an interesting mechanic that really stuck with me since I played the game back in 1996, and I wanted to share it with you. While we are on the topic of Mario swimming, did you both discover that Mario has two styles of swimming in Mario 64? One, of course, is the breaststroke that he does when you tap A, but the other is a leg paddle that he does when you hold A, which makes maneuvering him a lot easier. Keep up the great work, and I look forward to all the future Game Clubs. Best, Mark Garcia. I did not notice that about the music.
No, that's a really interesting, yeah.
It's fantastic. I love it. It is the sort of thing that I think games can do particularly well, and that kind of level of care, I feel badly for A, having missed, but B, I think it is very much indicative of the sort of care that Nintendo takes, especially with its big flagship titles.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, I guess, when we talk about music, but to some degree, I don't know if it is. I mean, I don't consider it necessarily bad that we missed it per se. I mean, good, scores that are well placed and well designed. Kind of, you want them to just be part of the experience, and right, kind of reinforce it. And so, I don't know. I'm maybe that's my positive spin on it, but it's intriguing that, now I'm kind of wondering what other things like that they customized in that way. But yeah, it's good. Thanks for.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. As far as the breaststroke and the leg paddle, I was aware that you could do both. In many of the challenges, I'm thinking particularly of chasing after the manta ray. I feel like you have to be tapping the button in order to be moving fast enough to get the point. Right.
Yeah, I knew about it too, but I feel like every time I did it, I was going too slowly. So yeah. Right.
And with, of course, the health ticking down the whole time, you have that to worry about as well. Mm-hmm. But yes, I did notice it, and there was one time I got sucked towards that vortex and was jamming on that button to try to swim away from it. So I definitely noticed. So interesting thing. Thanks, Mark. I threw another one your way.
Okay, this says game lawyer. I don't know what that means, but I guess we'll see.
That's who it's from. There was there was a subject. Oh, absolutely. What parent named whose last name is lawyer doesn't want to name their child gamer?
Gamer lawyer.
Right.
Hi, Brett and Tim. Long time no email. Love the Mario 64 series. Glad to hear two of Tim's favorite levels were the same as me, Wet Dry World and Womp's Fortress. Agreed. In particular, the last 2 stars of Wet Dry World blew my mind in the 90s. I don't think I caught Brett's favorite levels, though? Question mark. Also, it occurred to me that Mario 64 is far and away my most replayed video game, excluding multiplayer games. Another good one is Skyrim, which I'm replaying in handheld mode. Exclamation point. What a time to be alive, he says. What do you think makes a really replayable game? What are some of your most replayed games? Best, a board gamer. Now he's a board gamer. P.S. I tried to leave a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast app, but it wouldn't process. I'll try again later. Well, thank you, sir, for trying again, or madam. Yep. Yeah. So what were your favorite levels again? I forget as well.
I don't know. Yes, I don't know that I actually we talked about it in pre-show, and I don't know that I brought it forward. I liked the jumping between poles on the Dire Dire docks.
Oh yeah,
as one specific challenge I really liked. I also quite enjoyed the big tiny island. The whole conceit of jumping into one or the other painting as a result. And becoming one size or the other as a result, I thought was fantastic and imaginative and delightful. So that, regardless of what the challenges were, just the entry was terrific. I also particularly like the clockwork level, and how if you got the clock set to the right time, the clockwork wasn't moving and stuff, which we talked about maybe also off air. But those were all things that I really appreciated. I like those sorts of little gimmicks where you go, oh, I didn't think of that. That's kind of cool. So those are ones that definitely held up for me.
What about replayable games for you?
Replayable games for me is tough. I have played, well, other than things that I've played for a second time for the podcast, or in some cases a third time for the podcast, I think the games I've replayed I've replayed Eco, I've replayed Shadow of the Colossus. Those were both my third time playing the game when I played them for the podcast. I've replayed the Ratchet and Clank games.
Mm-hmm. What makes them replayable for you, do you think?
For me, I just love being in that colorful platformy world. It's not, there's not one thing. Yeah. I just, hey, these have been updated for the PS3 or whatever, and I just got them again and played them again. The one that I would have expected I would have done so with was the Sly Cooper trilogy, which I have not. But I feel like someday I will. I will get back around to those and play them again because I quite enjoyed them. But mostly I don't. Mostly I don't replay games. How about you?
Yeah, I mostly don't too, mainly due to time. But there definitely are some of those classics, and that just, I guess, resonated with me so much that I really, I want to play them when I get that that tinge that I miss them or something. And so for me, Eco and Shadow as well, though Shadow I've played more times than Eco, but Shadow specifically is a key game for me from a replayability standpoint. That's why I'm so excited they're doing that yet another remake thing. And this is not trying to plug what my day job is, but Halo is actually another franchise, probably maybe 3 more than one, but that's one that I go back to because I've always loved the sort of experimentation of the sandbox, because it's so unpredictable sometimes about how those games play, and that's why I love working on them. So that's one series. I've played Half-Life and Half-Life 2 a fair number of times, just because they're just classics and I love them. And then, of course, Metal Gear.
Well, you love your Metal Gear,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Metal Gear
I was trying to think if there are any PC titles that are like in my library that I've played more than once. I mean, it's funny because I can't return and play Skyrim or Fallout because I have replayed the BioShock, first two BioShock games.
Hitman's one for me as well. That's
you love your Hitman. Yeah, that's good stuff. Yes, I feel like I need to go and play more of the Hitman that was out last year or whatever. I know it.
Yeah,
it is. It's really good, and I just it's just a mental bandwidth thing to not have played more of it. I think those are all the big ones for me that I can think of. Of course, I think. Oh, and here's one more: Grim Fandango, which we haven't played for the podcast, but which I have played at least 3 times. That story, I am a film noir kind of buff, and that particular story, with its Mexican Day of the Dead mashup with the film noir, really, really tickles something for me. The storytelling's great. The puzzles, some are good, some are some I could miss. So that's another one, and I guess Full Throttle for that matter. I've played it several times as well. So some of those old story adventure games from LucasArts still definitely scratch a certain itch for me. So
it's fun. It's funny that we didn't have any Nintendo games on our list. For us personally.
Right. I mean, this is the second time for me playing Mario 64, but I was leaving out things I played in the cast, and I really haven't gone back and played. I can't think of a Mario game, Nintendo game rather, that I've gone back and played. I mean, technically, I guess Mario Kart, because I've been playing Mario Karts forever. World
of Warcraft.
Right, sure.
For me, it's like I've been playing that game since Friends and Family Beta, and taking breaks. But yeah, it's a whole different thing now.
Right, that's a lifestyle. That's not replaying. That's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Weren't you like the head of a guild at some point?
I still am technically, though the guild is kind of. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Main tank. We'll get into that someday.
Someday, right when the vanilla version comes out.
Discussed because they announced vanilla servers. We've discussed maybe doing that for the podcast, which that's going to be hilarious. I don't know what that's going to. Although the cool thing about that is that we could play together.
That's true. That is kind of cool is maybe a strong word, but that would be interesting.
I can't wait. No, Brett, just go kill that boar over there. You need 5 boars. It's going to be great. It'll be fun.
Oh boy. Okay. And then I have the last email. This is from Tim Dorr of the Coventry Doors. It says DGC game suggestion. We don't normally read emails which are game suggestions, but there was other stuff to grab onto in here. So Tim says, "Hi again. I'm still really enjoying your podcast a few months in. It remains my favorite gaming podcast. Your series on Mario 64 has finally persuaded me to dust off my N64 and give 3D Mario a try. It feels that much more rewarding after listening to your discussion, and I'm managing to persist, though I'm only a little way in. I was interested by your coverage of Silent Hill 2. I don't go near horror games as a rule. I work as a clinical psychologist offering psychotherapy, so the subject matter of my work is dark enough, and I've no real desire to watch or play on anything disturbing at home. It sounded like a fascinating game, though, and I particularly enjoyed the links you made to psychodynamic, i.e. Freudian theories, such as the concepts of id, ego, and superego. You sounded surprisingly familiar and comfortable with those ideas. I emailed you once before suggesting Thief the Dark Project as a game to cover, and thinking about your Halloween game next year, it might be an ideal choice. Thief will be 20 years old on November 30th, 2018, and it blends stealth with survival horror gameplay in many of its levels. Maybe one to pencil in for next autumn. A few other games I'd love to hear covered would be anything from the 90s by Bullfrog, in particular Dungeon Keeper or Theme Hospital, the original Super Mario Kart, Deus Ex, and Portal. Thanks again, Tim. So I thought actually two things here. One we can talk about psychodynamics, but then the other was how we actually pick our games. Would be another thing I guess we could talk a little bit about, because all of those are interesting suggestions to me.
Mm-hmm.
As far as Freud goes, I did read quite a bit of Freud in high school, which explains a lot about me.
He admitted it, folks, on air, so it's on the record.
That's right. I did not read it, however, in the original German. I couldn't get past the B's. Z's. Right. So yes, I'm a little bit familiar with that stuff. It's years, and it is basically a gloss for me. But I did read a bunch of that stuff back then. I was a strange child. But as far as games we pick, how do we pick them?
I may feel like we've talked a little bit about this from time to time, but yeah, we. I mean, I don't know. I guess we kind of have a theory that I don't know how true we know it is or is not, but that if it's nice to play. There's so many influential games. It'd be nice to play a game that might have some direct connection to the current zeitgeist of the day, or a game that's been released recently, or something to sort of show that lineage. And so, we played Mario 64 because Odyssey was coming out, and in that case, it seems like there was pretty much a direct lineage in a lot of ways. And so that was kind of timely because we assume kind of the listeners would be thinking about Mario Odyssey, and then we might be playing the sort of predecessor, So we try to think of timing, and we're pretty tapped into the release, windows and schedules of games today. So we can kind of plan ahead and see, this is probably going to come out, and maybe we should try to, so that's one thing. I guess.
Yeah, last year we did TIE Fighter with Rogue One coming out.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Yeah, good example.
We did Link to the Past when the new Zelda was out. So
Fallout when Fallout 4 was coming out, I think.
That's
around there.
True. Yes, I think that's right. Yeah.
Or the expansion, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe some other specific tie-in, but definitely we do try to pick up on stuff that's coming out just because people will be maybe more interested in those topics. And we also are trying to cover a bunch of genres, and as people have pointed out, stealth is actually one that we haven't covered. We've had some email about that recently, so that is a thing I think we'll be turning to soon, maybe even as the next game, as I hinted earlier. So. It's very much on our minds. It feels like a genre we need to hit, and given how much, in particular, Tim loves the genre, it's kind of surprising that we haven't yet.
I've just been savoring. I think, it's maybe one of my favorite genres, in fact. But yeah, Thief is an amazing game. I think that's one we should play for sure. Though technically, System Shock 2, I think, was a Looking Glass published game. I would say we really haven't played a core Looking Glass game yet, so
right.
Thief might be a good one. We definitely will play Deus Ex eventually. We know that. That's that's one on our list. Yeah, to Brett's point, sometimes like Half-Life, I don't think was, when we played that wasn't based on any particular event coming up. It's just we hadn't played a core shooter yet, and we wanted to get that genre on the list. So.
Yep. So coming up, I think definitely that we haven't really, have we done a sim? Oh well, we did XCOM, which is a sim for sure.
Yeah. So, but we haven't done like Civ, or we haven't done like a 4X kind of sim yet.
Right. So we have lots of opportunities there too. So plenty of stuff to do. I'm always happy to have the suggestions. There may be games that we haven't thought of. I know recently I got an email suggesting Abe's Odyssey. I don't know if you remember that, the Oddworld game, the first Oddworld game, as a title. I don't know that there was specifically something I could point to with that and say, oh, this ties in with whatever, but I threw it on the list. Hey, maybe we'll get to that one of these days. So definitely some stuff to catch up to. There are so many games. We'll be dead before we get to all of them. that's for sure. Okay. All right. Let's hit a couple reviews and then we'll call it a night. You have you have the first one.
Yeah, nice meaty one here. Insightful and nostalgic from Ashman86. Definitely his real name.
Oh, absolutely.
I first started listening to Dev Game Club after Jason Schreier talked about the show on Kotaku Split Screen. Since then, it's become one of my most favorite podcasts and a weekly highlight for me. What's most incredible about the show for me is the way Brett and Tim can take a familiar game, even one near and dear to my own heart, and deconstruct it in ways I never considered before, particularly when they reveal how careful manipulation of what the player sees in a game can create the perception of depth in what might actually be a relatively shallow solution, like the squad AI in Republic Commando or the intentional inaccuracy of the shield bar in Halo, which encourages the player to believe they're just scraping by in a combat encounter. Their comments are always insightful into the processes and perspectives of the developers behind the games I love. And they've had some incredible guests on the show too, like Chris Avalon, Julian Gallup, Mark Laidlaw. I couldn't believe it when Gallup revealed that XCOM had been developed under the radar and off the books, or when Laidlaw and Dario Casali revealed that Valve had originally intended to include cutscenes in Half-Life. Great show with some great hosts. Do yourself a favor and subscribe already. Thank you, Ashman86.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, the interviews in particular are a thing that we love to have. And it was funny because we've played a lot of Japanese games this year, and I was looking back and wow, we've played a lot of games where we haven't been able to get to interviews, and even some interviews that we thought we'd get had fallen through. But then I was reflecting and like, oh yeah, we had Mark Laidlaw, we had Julian Gallup, we had Dario Casali, we had Chris Avalon, we had our buddies Reed Knight and Darren Johnson, and we had Larry Holland. So we actually had a really full year of interviews.
Yeah.
From going all the way back to January, because I think all the TIE Fighter stuff was right at the beginning of the year. So there's actually a lot of stuff there. I was kind of surprised. It surprised myself looking back, because I was like, wow, I felt like last year we had a ton, and this year not too many. And then I looked, and oh yeah, actually there have been quite a few.
Yeah, we got good and lucky on stuff. I really wish we're trying to break into the Japanese side of things and maybe have some bites on things, but it's really difficult for various reasons. So
right, yeah, the time zone differences are a hard thing, and then of course the language barrier is another hard thing. So,
I mean, talking to some of my friends, Japanese developers and friends at work, like the other barrier that is really interesting is
the
culturally, they don't talk about their development processes the way we do. They're much more
there is no
professional than we are. We just say whatever we talk about, all but there's more protocols there. I think is what they're kind of
technically neither Tim nor I are allowed to give our personal opinions of the original Star Wars, of the prequel films, because we signed NDAs when we were at LucasArts, and there was no end date for those. So I can't tell you what I think of the Phantom Menace. I can't actually even confirm it exists. So we haven't. I guess we haven't really followed those too well. Anyway, I have the last one. It is brief, insightful, and enjoyable by Addict Arts. Absolutely. Clearly. I enjoy the show. As a game developer, it helps as encouragement. And you know what? We can all use a little bit of that. So,
nice. Well, that's great.
Happy to encourage.
Definitely need encouragement.
We do, because, oh my God, these are tough things to make. Okay, so we were talking about next time, and I already forgot the name of the place, Votown, on Democritus. We're going to try to play up to and maybe including that. We'll see. We'll basically kind of base it on how many hours we need to play in order to do that. We're going to aim to do that for next week, and then the next week after that will be the week between Christmas and New Year's, and we'll try to do a wrap-up special as we did last year. I haven't had any other bright ideas thrown our way, so we'll stick with that, I think. I'll be traveling around that time. Tim is traveling a bit between now and then, and it just makes sense for us to listen back on, especially our interviews, and try to pick up on the things that we really want to reflect back on the last year, and kind of hodgepodge that together like a very special Dev Game Club. So that is what we will aim to do over the next couple of weeks. In the meantime, you can shoot us email at devgameclub@gmail.com like all those fine folks did. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at devgameclub. I'm at Brett_Duville on Twitter, and he is
at Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And of course, we will see you next week. Thanks very much, and good night.
Good night.